Welcome. This is Grid Live Wrap Up. Felipe Nasr has left Daytona with another brand new watch. Was this the most impressive Rolex 24 win? Oliver Solberg is now a full-time driver in the World Rally Championship and a race winner in 2026. The Hyundai let this young talent slip away. Welcome to Grid Life Wrap Up. Joe San Diego, Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight, and Matthew Rowe from GridNetworkTV.com. A big shout out to Jason, our super chat from yesterday during the pre-race show of the Rolex 24. We thank everyone for tuning in. And of course, our Patreon investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, Crystal, Nico, our newest investor, link in the video description to invest in the Grid Network. And as I mentioned, you can do a super chat just like Jason did. And a big thank you to everyone that subscribed. Hit the bell icon. Follow us across social media at Grid Network TV because we'll be on the air all year long. Our next pre-race show will be for the 24 hours, not the 24 hours Daytona, the Daytona 500, the other big race at Daytona International Speedway. We'll be back on the air Wednesday for Grid Tonight. And we appreciate all the support. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our program. Let's get started with the Rolex 24 hours of Daytona coverage. This is the big race that kicks off the IMSA season. Very excited to see the racing season start to get back into gear. And for the third consecutive year, Porsche Penske number 7, Porsche 963, won the Rolex 24 hours. Felipe Nasr, Julian Andlauer, and Lauren Heinrich earned the overall victory after holding out the number 31 Action Express Racing Wheeling Engineering Cadillac of Earl Bamber, Jack Aitken, Frederick Vesti, and Connor Zillage. Of course, coming over from the NASCAR side, the number 24 BMW M Team WRT BMW finished third overall, taking the final stop on the podium. Looking at the overall winner, though, Porsche Penske, especially Nasr, while this is his number 7, third consecutive win, as a driver himself, we talked a lot about this yesterday, Matthew. Third consecutive Rolex 24-hour win. The last time a driver won 3 in a row was his fellow countryman from Brazil, Helio Castroneves, 2021, 22, and 23. Nasr has 24, 25, 26, and counting. Nasr has won the race overall with 7 different co-drivers now. The last 3 years, the number 17, Dane Cameron, Matthew Campbell, Joseph Newgard, Nick Tandy, Lauren Van Zoor, Julian Andler, Lauren Heinrich. NBC Sports told a fascinating story about how Nasr Roger Penske had a secret meeting in the parking lot to sign Nasr to a deal with Penske in 2019 to 2021. Porsche Penske Motorsport also becomes the third team to win 3 consecutive Rolex 24s, joining Chip Ganassi Racing from 2006 to 2008 and Wayne Taylor Racing. Kobe, let's start with you. How impressed are you with Porsche Penske Motorsports winning the Rolex 24 for the third straight year and Felipe Nasr holding off Jack Aitken during the final stint? That was fascinating racing, especially with 40-30 to go.
Yeah, Joe. I have to say that Penske, Porsche Penske Motorsport, entering this year, they brought on an updated version of their Porsche 963 prototype, and it's safe to say that this update is the real deal because those Porsches, they were lights out quick. Both of them, both the number 6 and the number 7 Porsche. I'm not going to make a 6-7 joke for all the kids out there. I promise I will not. But those Porsches were definitely the class of the field. And also the number 85 Porsche, JDC Miller Motorsports, they were running, as I mentioned in the chat yesterday, since I couldn't be here live, they're running last year's package since they could not afford to get the 2026 package, but they were very strong as well and finished inside the top 10 overall, so kudos to them. But Penske Porsche Motorsport, this was their race to lose, I believe. Towards the end of the race, NBC said that Porsche Penske Motorsports number 7 Porsche, they led over half of the race, and then when you combine them and the number 6 Porsche, they led like 2/3 of the race. So this was truly their race to lose, and they were just impressive in every aspect of the race. Never really put a wheel wrong, and they just had the overall speed. And Felipe Nasr, he was the right one to put in at the end to get the job done, and he ended up sealing the deal. And since Porsche Penske Motorsport is not going to be in the World Endurance Championship, unfortunately, since Porsche decided to cut the funds to that program, it's really nice that they'll still be in IMSA, be able to show what they can do, and it would not surprise me if we end up seeing, if we end up seeing Felipe Nasr and Julian Enlauer, being the season-long champions at the end of the year. They're certainly off to a really good start. And I'm very impressed that Nasr's won this race, 3 years in a row with all different co-drivers. He hasn't won this event twice with the same co-driver, which is, really impressive. And just think about year after year, all the chemistry, you have to build with your teammates. Some driver lineups like a Philippe Albuquerque and Ricky Taylor over at Wayne Taylor Racing. They've been together for a number of years now. So, they have that chemistry. Just think, Felipe, he's had different teammates every single year, and he has to build chemistry with those guys. And, that's not always the easiest thing to do. And I just think it's super impressive that he's been able to win all these Rolex 24s with all these different drivers. And if he returns to Penske next year, it makes me wonder, is he going to have two more, drivers who are going to be different teammates, so he can try to win with those to keep the streak going. But all in all, Felipe Nasr, very impressive. Three years in a row winning the Rolex 24 overall. He's certainly, becoming a legend in the sports car racing world. No, it didn't work out for him in Formula One, but now as a Porsche factory driver, it seemed like the sky's the limit for him, and he's only going to get better over time. And that was an epic battle to end there with Jack Aitken exiting the tri-oval bank, and I thought they were going to have a big crash there when Aitken, tried to go underneath and below the double yellow line, but thankfully, nothing happened there, and they both kept it clean. And towards the end, just some really good hard racing, and at the end, Nasr just had the power, in the wheel over the Action Express Racing Cadillac there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it is. I mean, when you think about it, right, I believe this was the 64th Rolex 24, and it's only happened 3 times in the history of the event where a specific team has 3 consecutive wins. And for Felipe Nasr to be that guy, the go-to guy, I would say, for 3 years in a row to get it done, that's incredibly impressive. Joe and I talked on the pre-race show, like, we know he's that guy. Is he going to be able to do it? Yeah, he was. And it didn't come very easily. I know the Porsche Penske team, both the 6 and the 7 car, I will make that joke, they dominated. They really did. Anytime you lead well over half of an endurance race of this magnitude and this long, shows how good you are as an organization. So for them to go out there and just, I can't really say put belt to butt, because that 31 Cadillac team really gave them a run for their money at the end. And I joked in our Slack chat that if they were to wreck each other, I feel like that the 24 team, the BMW team, nobody really talked about them at all, I feel, and didn't give them that respect. That's partially on me too. I don't think I mentioned them at all. But for them to go out there and get on the podium is pretty dang impressive too. So yeah, I think it's super impressive for Felipe Nasr. It'd be awesome if they let him go for 4 in a row next year. And it shows sometimes it might not work out for you in certain things in life, whether it's a job, in this case for Nasr, Formula One, but for him able to go to endurance racing and be that guy who seems to know no matter what type of car can get in it and go out there and win, you just got to be happy for him at the end of the day. So it was a great battle. I love that cable people were able to actually watch at least a great battle at the end, because the other 21 and a half, 22 hours, they weren't because of Peacock. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other day if you don't have Peacock. So you missed the majority of this race. A lot of caution time, which we'll talk about that too. But yeah, just like I said, a great job for Felipe Nasr and the entire Porsche Penske team. Almost had 2 podium spots, but to be first and fourth, nothing to frown upon. And it was exciting. That's all I can. I also want to add quickly, Connor Zilic was pretty cool, being from the NASCAR side. Would have been the youngest overall winner ever. But that might have to hold off for another year for that kid over there. But he ran a full stint under caution. Kind of feel bad for him. But yeah, I'll throw it back to you guys.
And whatever running Connor did get, earlier in the race before, that long overnight session where a lot of drivers just logged 6 hours behind the safety car. I mean, it helped with drive time and all of that, but yeah, unfortunate for if you're a driver out there and that was like your only time in the car, that's just painful. Like, you had the most boring job. It's basically like watching paint dry, running behind the safety car. But when Connor was in the car earlier, he was very quick. He was right on pace, right in the mix, right there with the other GTP drivers, and given his ability to adapt. We should expect nothing less from Connor Zilic at this point, because the expectations for him are extremely, extremely high. And also we had AJ Allmendinger in the show as well. I felt like AJ did a great job holding his own in GTP and the Meyer Shank race in Acura, the number 60. And Matthew, I'm actually glad you brought up BMW because BMW Team WRT, they're brand new to the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship on a full-time basis. We've seen them run IMSA in the past, like the Michelin Endurance Cup races and all of that. But this is their first time where they're actually like here full-time running the BMW factory GTP program. They took over that from Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, which running a McLaren now in GTD Pro. And Team WRT, they're actually, here in North Carolina now, they set up their IMSA program in the Charlotte area, to try instead of, trying to do everything from Europe. And, they kind of got off to a late start with this program, and they admitted that it was going to take, some time to build up to speed. But I think, once they get integrated in this championship, given their strong record of racing in Europe, that they'll eventually, be true contenders in IMSA, because BMW believes that it's important to have the exact same team, running both cars across the globe instead of having a different team in the US and a different team in Europe. They just wanted this program under one roof. Only time will tell if that was the right decision, but given the fact that Team WRT, their BMWs, I'll have to admit, between the roar and the race, they didn't really have the best overall speed in the GTP class, but since this is a 24-hour endurance race, they were able to salvage a podium. I think that's something they should be really proud of and something to build on as we get into the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring in March.
Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring is going to be a lot of fun once we get to that race to see everyone back on track, especially Daytona. Just the way the race worked out with that 6 hour, 30+ minute caution period for fog. I think a lot of folks will love to see what we could do in that 12-hour race later in the year. LMP2, there's a lot of drivers. They're looking forward to Sebring just to forget what happened on lap 1. The race got off to a chaotic start with a crash starting essentially the race heading into turn 1. LMP2 cars were spinning, some suffering damage, and others drove off the track to avoid the chaos. One of the cars that spun on lap 1 ended up winning LMP2. The number 04 CrowdStrike Racing APR Orca 07 Gibson of Alex Quinn, George Kurtz, Toby Sawyer, and Matej Jakobsen. However, Kurtz, the gentleman driver, spun multiple times during the race, and CrowdStrike came back for those errors to get the win. Of course, this is part of LMP2. You're going to have some of the gentleman drivers, different classes. Matt, did you expect to see the number 4 CrowdStrike LMP2 in victory lane? And should IMSA consider changing the rules to prevent gentleman drivers from starting next year's Rolex 24 and requiring the pro drivers to take the green flag instead?
For me personally, I was all about the Inner Europol. Is that the team? Yeah. Inner Europol competition teams. I really thought they were going to have it in the bag, and they didn't. So shout out the CrowdStrike, excuse me. But I thought that was interesting about, of course, the driver who starts it is a gentleman driver and then obviously spinning multiple times. I don't know. It's interesting because you like the idea of the gentleman driver starting first so they can get the allotted time and really get out of there, right? Because you kind of, I hate to say it, but you kind of want them to have the least amount of time split of all your drivers usually, but unless they're feeling it, because sometimes they do feel it and they do really well. And it's not like they're any worse, but obviously, circumstances with being a gentleman driver. But I think it would have been funny if a lot of them got their time under the safety car. And I can't confirm, obviously, you guys might be able to more than me, how many gentleman drivers were actually out there during the safety car period just to get the allotted time and just to get, time under their belt in a race car. But yeah, I don't know if they should change a rule. I'm really indifferent with that. It's good to kind of get it out of the way, I guess. And is it up? I'm not as familiar with the rule, but is it really up to the team to decide, or is it more like is it a mandatory thing where the gentleman drivers have to start the events?
Well, Matthew, I believe it's a requirement. where the gentleman driver has to start the event. And I remember, Joe, it didn't have anything to do with rating. Remember, Supercars made a rule a few years ago at the Bathurst 1000 because it was the 1 year when we could not get the race going because so many of the co-drivers, there was a big wreck at the start. And every time we go racing, a co-driver was, messing up, and just causing a whole bunch of chaos. And then that race start was so bad, Supercars reacted immediately and said that, your full-time drivers or if you have like an extra entry, like the main driver in that lineup would have to, start the race. But then a lot of supercars team, they started complaining how they screwed up their strategy of if you had your main driver start and all of that. And now they switched it back. I believe the last year was the first time, in a few years that they brought it back where, where your co-drivers can start the race for the Bathurst 1000. And I do think, for the Rolex 24 at Daytona, I think it would be good if we had all pro drivers in all 4 classes, starting the race. It would more than likely, be a lot cleaner, than what we saw at the start of the Rolex 24 and the LMP2 class. But, at the same time, I think you'd run into the same issues that supercars ran into where, the teams are upset because it's screwing up their strategy. As you said, Matthew brought up a really good point that it's important, we're glad the gentleman drivers are in the sport, but we know that 9 times out of 10, they're obviously going to be a lot slower than the professionals in that lineup. So you want to get their drive time out of the way immediately. So they get their drive time in, you don't have to worry about them anymore. And then you can put your fast guys in there to, go the rest of the way. And I feel like if we went to that change, to go back to a requirement, and at some point you're going to have the teams get upset. And then we're going to be back where we are right now, where we're having the gentleman driver start the race. So I can see both sides of the equation here, but yeah, I can't confirm what you said, Matthew. But it would have been really smart during the overnight hours to put your gentleman driver in to get his drive time in because during that 6-hour period you could have got out all the drive time that you needed for one of the silver or bronze rated drivers. They can just go on the rest of the way. So I don't really think IMSA is going to make a change, based on one incident like this, because usually, the gentleman drivers do a really good job, at the start of the race, stand out of the way and all of that. We do see, a few incidents here and there. I think yesterday, it was just one of those days at the start of the Rolex 24.
Yeah, it was sometimes just one of those deals where you get a messy start at the beginning of the race. Will they make changes? I don't know, but if it happens again a second year in a row, I think then you'll hear a lot more noise about maybe changing the way we start this big event. Of course, the Rolex 24 hours, they were saying one of the largest attended Rolex 24 hours, I believe, ever, highest attendance. So love to give the fans that come out, see a good start, a good race. Instances do occur during motorsports. We just don't want to see them at the very beginning of a 24-hour endurance race. GTD Pro, the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, Anil Verhey, Connor D. Felipe, Max Hess, and Dan Harper took the class win. Harper held off the number 75 Express Mercedes Mario Engel, who came up just short of getting the win for his Australian co-drivers Kenny Habul and Chas Mostert. Will Power. The win for Paul Miller Racing comes a year after they were involved with controversy involving Corvette racing by Pratt Miller Motorsports. Last year, when PMR had another car, team orders came into play as Augusto Farfus tried to make life hard for the Corvette of Tommy Milner, which resulted in Milner's car suffering damage and flipping off Farfus. Kobe, after everything we saw, how big of a relief must this be for Paul Miller Racing to win this year without the controversy?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't win last year either, because the controversy, effectively took, one of their cars out of contention. I think the other BMW that they had at the time, it was like multiple lap stabs, so it had like no reason to be doing what it was doing to the Corvette to try to disrupt the battle and help out the sister car. It was just one of them cases, nasty team orders, going on in that type of situation. So I think for Paul Miller Racing this year has to be a huge relief because, they can just leave with their Rolex watches with a smile on their face. Because remember on last year's wrap-up show after the Rolex 24, we were criticizing Paul Miller Racing for how they handled the situation, which I believe was justified at the time. And I thought Neil Verhagen, Connor D. Felipe, and Max Hess and Dan Harper ran a very good race. And Harper did a great job, there at the end. Maringo looked like he had a little bit, left in the tank in that Mercedes because he was getting closer, and then Harper just extended out and ended up pulling away for the win. So I think the Paul Miller Racing Squad can be really pleased with this year's result because they were close last year. It didn't happen. They finally got the job done, and we don't have to be talking about them in a negative way because of a controversy that happened on the racetrack. And if you watch the overnight broadcast on Peacock, the NBC broadcasters were poking a little fun with Tommy Milner, who they brought on there. They brought him on, and they were talking about last year. They're just having some good fun there, remembering what had happened. And one thing, we did not have an Augusto Farfus in the race this year, so there was nobody to be angry at.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a huge relief to win without any of the controversy. And I went and rewatched that again today, pretty much right before the show, and I was like, damn, they really did that with the blocking multiple laps down, and then obviously the collision. That was just crazy. So I don't really have much more to add, I don't believe, for what Kobe said. I just think it's definitely, you can go home with a smile on your face and a nice Rolex on your wrist after that one. Just definitely must be a huge sigh of relief to win this year without any of the controversy. And pretty sure there was no controversy that we caught under anything, or especially with all the caution time. It was kind of hard. It gave him a lot less time, I feel, to have something occur like that. But yeah, like Joe, you had mentioned, the most people ever at a Rolex 24 with the longest caution ever at a Rolex 24. So I don't know if those correlate or not, but I guess we'll see for 2027 how that plays out. But yeah, I got really nothing else to add. It's just shout out to the Paul Miller Racing team, winning without any controversy.
Yeah, a good win without any controversy. Great way to start the season. I know, especially after the last few years with controversy following the conclusion of the race and the winning teams. We talked briefly about Marsh and Grayson a couple of years ago. I think it would be a great start to enter Sebring with the storylines of the championship, the tight battles on the track, and nothing about penalties. One of the most exciting battles we saw on the track, GTD, put on a show between two cars. The number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes and the number 44 Magnuson Racing Aston Martin. During the final stint, we saw an intense battle between Windward Philip Ellis and Magnuson driver Nicky Timms in the closing minutes. There was a scary moment even in the trial between the two when Ellis got into Timms, leaving left rear and almost sending him spinning around at full speed. Thankfully, we avoided a big one, and Windward went on to win again with Ellis, Russell, Ward, Indy Donje, and Lucas Auer. Matt, did this battle leave you on the edge of your seat, and do you believe Ellis deserves a penalty for nearly crashing Tim in the tri-oval?
I was absolutely on the edge of my seat. I was watching it down at my house with my mother, and I was like, "Oh, whoa, whoa!" I was like, you get kind of excited. But coming from the NASCAR perspective, you kind of like a little bumping, but then when you come to like the IMSA side, you're like, that shouldn't be happening. So I feel like a lot of people thought they deserved the penalty. I don't really have a strong opinion on it, to be honest with you. Nothing really occurred. I just think a little bit of side drafting and blocking gone wrong, which I know there were teams earlier penalized for blocking, which, like we just mentioned the moment last year with the incident, I'm pretty sure that lapped car was penalized for doing all the blocking, and then that collision happened last year. But in this event, I'm not sure how many penalties were for like blocking and moving under braking, so on and so forth. But yeah, I don't know if he deserved a penalty personally. I don't know if it's too late to give them a penalty. I don't know if the results have been official yet, but I think so. But yeah, it was racing. So I guess from my perspective, I liked it and nobody got hurt. It was a little chaotic. I could only imagine side drafting at 170 miles per hour, and all of a sudden your wheel is going a lot more left than you thought it was going to be going. So yeah, that was probably one of my favorite moments, I would say, of the event. Is I don't know what class, Joe, we said yesterday would have been the most competitive. I don't know if we had mentioned the GTD Pro class and GTD, but I mean that brought a lot of excitement. And if those two cars took each other out, pretty sure the the other podium finisher in third, it would have taken a little bit for them to get there. So kind of two of the best in the business right there in that class, at least in this event, from today and yesterday, technically, because it is 24 hours. But yeah, that's all I really have to add to that. I was on the edge of my seat, and I don't know if they deserve a penalty. Kobe is well more educated in this, so I'm more. I would rather hear your guys' opinions on this. So then maybe I'll change mine.
Well, I certainly agree. It left me on the edge of my seat as well. Thought that was a great battle right up there with the GTP battle between Nasr and Aitken there at the end. I have to say, Philip Ellis, Nicky Tim, take a bow. You put on a really good show for us. I'm glad I actually got to see it because unfortunately my local NBC affiliate kept cutting into ice storm coverage, so I kind of had to switch back and forth between NBC and Peacock to actually be able to see the great racing there at the end. But I'm glad I got to see the battle that mattered the most there. And in regards to the penalty, I'm actually going to say I agree with the decision to make a no call in this situation. Like you said, Matthew, some people have said that they would have liked to seen a penalty in that situation because, IMSA has become more aggressive with the penalties that hand out, like for blocking and stuff after that chaotic Road America race we had last year. Then IMSA said that we're not going to allow this to become the Wild Wild West, that we are going to put our foot down and make tough calls and all of that. But I feel like that, hey, you're racing for a Rolex watch, you're racing for a Rolex 24 class victory here. I think in a situation like this, you can let a little contact like that slide. I admit it would have been very scary to see the Aston Martin go around in that situation, because you get turned around at the tri-oval at full speed in a sports car. You're going to see a very nasty accident. Thankfully, we avoided that. I think if the situation had happened, I think if Ellis had turned Nicky Tim and crashed him hard in the tri-oval there in the final 15 minutes or so, then he would have absolutely deserved a penalty for that situation. But since we all made it away, no harm, no foul, I think it was the right call to make no penalty in that situation, because I just saw that as hard racing. And since nothing happened, I think it's okay to let something like this slide in this situation.
Hard race in IMSA. Archie Bargy is a lot of times the talk of IMSA competition compared to World Endurance Championship and other sports car. But I gotta say, there has to be some point where IMSA says, okay, we're not going to allow this to go too much further. This was hard racing on the edge of your seat. I know we talked about Supercar race, the Bathurst 1000, the penalty that sort of left that finish a little bit dull, but at the end of the day, I think IMSA got it right. One thing I think a lot of people we talked about, did IMSA get this right? During the overnight hours, the race had a full course caution that lasted for 6 hours, 33 minutes due to low visibility because it was very foggy. For the longest time between the cautions, the race kept going and got so bad that spotters couldn't even see the cars anymore at various points of the track. However, the visibility was still good enough from inside the cockpit, and the marshal posts were still visible enough. It eventually got bad enough to IMSA had no choice but to run behind the safety car for over 6 hours. Kobe, starting with you, do you agree with IMSA's decision to run behind the safety car for a long time? Did they wait too long to bring out the full course caution? And should they have red flagged this race instead of such a long safety car period?
I think this is a very complicated, topic to talk on, because it's like no matter, what you do, there's going to be complications from whatever happens. And I think, by deciding to run behind the safety car for over 6 hours, I think IMSA, felt like they did what they had to do in that situation. I know it's not really fun for all of us watching, at home or at the track, just to see the cars as going around the track behind the safety car for multiple hours and hours and hours. And I was actually surprised that they waited this long to bring out the full course caution, because at first, we were getting photos on social media from like spotters and whatever, people at the track, and they were saying like, hey, I can't even see, the back stretch, like from the front stretch or anything like that. And NASCAR spotter and driver Will Rogers, they interviewed him on the broadcast, and he said, I think he was spotted for that number 44 Magnus Racing Aston Martin that was in contention to winning the GTD class. When they interviewed him on NBC or Peacock, Roger said that he had to tell his drivers in Aston Martin, I'm sorry guys, but you're out of luck, certain parts of the track, because I simply cannot see, like on the spotter stand, it was so crazy, it was so foggy, like you could literally not even see the back stretch at all. So the drivers, they were on their own, in that type of situation. And in previous Rolex 24s, fog is not a stranger at all. We've seen fog, like it usually happens like during the early morning hours, then we'll be behind the safety car for a little while, until the fog clears up. So that's something we've seen before. But even the fog in those cases, with the fog we saw last night, I felt like that was much worse than some of the conditions we've seen in previous years. So I'm surprised that the race was able to go on as long as it did, because we've seen them make quicker calls in the future when it was so foggy. And if they had decided to red flag the race, they would have had to adjust, like the drive time requirements. And, I think we've seen that in the past, it can become such a headache. So I think they have purposely avoided red flagging the race so they wouldn't have to, do these different drive times, and then, it messes up the team strategy. And then they have to because every team coming into these endurance races, they have strategy, being like, we're going to have this driver in this amount of time, all that. And I know with the timing of full course cautions and stuff, that can obviously change things as well. But if they red flagged the race for 6 hours and adjusted drive time, that would have thrown some teams for a major loop, and they would have, had to try to, figure out an extremely hard equation of trying to, make sure everyone's reached their drive time requirements and all of that, because you don't want to, have someone not meet the drive time requirement, because then, you get your entire result thrown out, you get disqualified, and then it's like, man, I would have been better off at home and all of that. So I think that out of this whole situation, that IMSA was really in a tough position. I do think that the full course caution could have come out a lot sooner than it did, but but hey, at least the cars were still on the track, right? And the teams were able to, blow through whoever needed to get their drive time. I'm not trying to be rude here, but I guess the weakest driver in your lineup, who would probably be the slowest, you probably would want them in during that 6 hour period so they can get their drive time out of the way, so you wouldn't lose time, once things actually got back going.
Yeah, absolutely. I know IMSA specifically in the Rolex 24, they try their very best not to stop the races, red flags, unless something obviously drastic happened. I think 2019 is probably the best example of multiple red flags. I think that's one of the few races that they've ever had, at least in the Rolex 24, that have multiple because of the unsafe conditions, the torrential downpour, and stuff like that. But looking into the history of it, 2014 was red flagged because of accidents. 2007, 2004 had heavy rain, and I believe they actually ran out of full wet tires. Goodyear did in 2004. So good thing they didn't get that far. And then I believe it was 1989. I did not exist yet, but that had a 4 hour caution, I believe, because of fog as well. I would love to see the footage, if it's available, from 1989 to kind of see how bad it was to have the full course yellow or to red flag for 4 hours rather than do a full course yellow. But the reason why I brought up that in 2004 with the tires too is it's kind of a double-edged sword, because would the teams rather run those 6.5 hours under a full course yellow, get the drivers in to get their drive time, but at the same time you are really wasting certain resources like tires, like fuel, stuff like that. I mean, I don't really know if certain tire sets are allotted so they only can use it for that event, so on and so forth. So I don't know how that really works. So anyway, they're already bought and paid for, these teams, so might as well use them, right? But yeah, I feel like that's a very tough question, like Kobe mentioned, because I really don't think there's a right answer. Because if you like somebody, I have a buddy of mine who in Central New York went down to Florida to watch this event. I would feel horrible if they were able to race under caution and they spent 5, 6, 7 hours under red flag where there was nobody out on the track. I feel like that would kind of suck for the people who made the trip down there. So as long as IMSA and the officials, marshals, they said it's safe enough to where they can ride around, get their time in, then I'm okay with that decision. So yeah, I don't know what I would have done differently. Maybe I would have thrown the full course yellow a little bit earlier, considering how bad the fog was. It sounds like the whole East Coast cannot avoid any bad weather. Fog, luckily, is probably the best case scenario for what Kobe and I are experiencing about 15 hours apart from each other with snow, ice, and stuff like that. So I guess it's good they got the race in 24 hours without having to red flag it.
Yeah, it's such a tough call. Shout out to IMSA president for being on the air to discuss with NBC's team about the situation and what they're trying to do. Safety is always one of those deals where it's easy for people to say, oh, they should have just let them race. They should have done this. But then you have something happen and we'll be saying, oh, this should have occurred sooner or should have been a red flag. I think that'll be something IMSA will definitely talk about in the future if we have a scenario like this again, because especially whereas a 4-hour delay back in the 80s, not a whole lot of TV exposure, not a whole lot of streaming services. Now we do have that. You have something to add, Kobe?
Yeah. John Dennon, the president of IMSA, absolutely deserves a shout out for that last night. He just didn't come on to talk about the situation there. He talked about a lot of other, pressing issues that that people may have, about transparency, and stuff related to IMSA. And John Dennon, he's always come off, as a friendlier voice, for an executive, because he seems to be had to take a fan first approach, and he truly cares about seeing this series succeed. And one of the controversial things that he addressed was something new added to the IMSA rule book just a few weeks ago. We were going to talk about it, on Grit tonight, but we had such a packed news show, unfortunately we didn't have room for it. But he was talking about the new rule related to the balance of performance, because there's a new clause that got put into the IMSA rule book stating that IMSA teams, drivers, personnel, you cannot criticize the series for, being off on balance of performance or something like that, because, every single sports car race you go to, some manufacturers will obviously, have more favorable balance of performance, and then, other manufacturers, for lack of better words, they'll get screwed completely. Yeah, we've seen that in the past where one manufacturer, they'll run completely away on the high banks of Daytona in a straight line speed, and then we'll see another manufacturer, they'll get absolutely killed on the straight line speed. What they'll be quicker in the infield, but when they get on the bank, and there's nothing they can do unless they catch a drive. So John Doonan basically tried to explain that situation, about balance of performance, where you can get fined, for saying like, hey, we would have won, but we didn't have the straight line speed because of the BOP. And if a driver says something like that, they're probably going to get fined by IMSA for doing something like that. And John Doonan, was trying to, explain that, there was no malicious intent behind that rule. But it's the fact is, that IMSA's on the up. He mentioned how IMSA's on the up right now. As you saw, Joe, you mentioned the fact that the Rolex 24, they put out a little statement on social media saying that this is one of the largest crowds ever in the history of the Rolex 24, and I believe it, because the pre-race grid was absolutely packed. They were like, there was like no standing room. It was like shoulder to shoulder on the pre-race grid, because there were so many fans there to see this event from all over the world, since it is a world-class all-star race to kick to I guess unofficially or officially kick off the 2026 motorsport season. So John Doonan was bringing up the point that IMSA is on a high right now. We want to keep soaring. That the reason why we have this rule in place, because we just don't want to try to tear down what we're building. That he's saying, like, if you have a concern, and he's saying he's not trying to shut down conversations about BOP that drivers and teams may have concerns about. He said he would just rather any BOP complaints happen behind closed doors so they can have those discussions. I know a lot of people may not agree with his assessment there, but I can certainly see his perspective, wanting to keep the dirty laundry behind closed doors. So if a manufacturer is angry, instead of airing it out in the public, like we've seen in the past, they can just talk to them privately. Then they can make adjustments needed behind the scenes, because I guess it'll just be better for business that way, and also for IMSA's image. So we don't have anyone slamming the BOP. And like I say, you may agree with him, you may disagree with him, but I think we can all agree we can at least respect him for coming on, because and to talk about it and try to explain it to all the fans.
Very great point. Yeah, he was out there just talking about all the stuff, trying to not only explain the situation going on with the Rolex 24, but just, again, knowing that there's people watching. If you're in the West Coast, especially like Alaska, Hawaii, where you're further back, you're probably watching this on Peacock 6 hours, but you got the president there telling you everything and going over the balance of power and that rule change. I think we're so used to hearing from other motorsports, you cannot criticize the officials, you cannot do this. For him to go and it's like, look, we're on the up. if you have problems, they can tell us privately. We don't need it to be public just so we're a unified front. I think that's just a really great example of what he's been doing. This Rolex 24 hours. I think a lot of people they'll remember, yeah, this is the year we had the fog, but I feel like no major controversies, a good battle for the finish. People will be talking about Felipe Nasr, his third consecutive, and of course, next year he might be going for a fourth consecutive, and will the 17 be going for a fourth consecutive? We'll find out all of that. But before we move away from the Rolex 24, again, thank you to everyone that tuned in yesterday. Before we move on, final takeaways, Matt, on this year's Rolex 24 hours.
Oh, gosh. Unfortunately, you can't predict Florida weather, I think, is one of them, especially with the fog. Two, not as many incidents, which I think was great. And then obviously, because you have 6.5 hours under caution or full course yellow, that limits the risk, obviously. But I think I got two big takeaways. One is you could have some of the best drivers in the world. When you have Alex Palou, Scott McLaughlin, Scott Dixon, Colton Herta, just all of them, Bloomquist, those guys, Nick Cassidy, Antonio Felix Acosta. One, they got to market it better because you had all these superstars, and I feel like it didn't get as enough attention as it deserved. But two, you can have all those guys, but when you put Felipe Nasr in a Porsche Penske, he is going to go out there and do what he does best. So pretty cool. You could have all the best drivers in the world, and I would argue, Felipe Nasr, especially in the endurance circuits, is in that conversation too. But yeah, that's probably one of my biggest takeaways. My other one is we had a lot of emphasis on the show about how important it is starting from the front. And I just really wonder how this race would have turned out if that number 31 Cadillac team did not get a penalty after qualifying on pole. I wonder if we would be having a completely different conversation right now, or the Felipe Nasr, the number 7 team, got out front almost immediately yesterday, it felt like, and they really held up front for the majority of this event. Both Penske's did. So those are kind of my takeaways. It's always a what if, and I guess my what if kind of is, what if that 31 team didn't try to break the rules a little too much to get a little bit of an edge? What would have happened? That's kind of my final takeaways, and there is still opportunities for rubbing and racing, as we saw in the GTD and GTD Pro classes. But yeah, that's mine. Looking forward to next year and for the whole entire IMSA season, obviously.
Yeah, I think those are some really good takeaways. My takeaways is, once again, IMSA delivers, gets you really excited for the racing season. And I know off season, it's not really an off season anymore because we have so much racing going on from around the world. But this, every year it feels like an all-star race to kick off the new motorsport season. And then, we get right into it because, we have the Cookout Clash next week in NASCAR. Then we got the Super Bowl, and then we got the Super Bowl of stock car racing with the Daytona 500. And then we just start having racing every single week until November, December. So we're about to really get into it in the next few weeks ahead. And I thought the racing was, obviously really good. Really loved that GTP and GTD battle at the end. And like saying, the Mercedes try to catch the BMW and the GTD Pro, and then you have a great comeback story in the CrowdStrike car. Despite George Kurtzson, that they were able to get that car back out front and win the class. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this year's 2026 IMSA season brings, and hopefully it'll be a lot more exciting moments because we'll have Sebring, we'll have Long Beach, and a lot of great tracks coming up during this first half of the season. Then we'll start to see where we stand championship wise. But it was great to see the Rolex 24 again. Since I watched a whole bunch of this race, I'm very tired. A lot of people are very tired, and I have to say that post Rolex 24 sleep is some of the best sleep I get every single year.
Well-deserved sleep, and of course we know one of our colleagues, your colleague on grid tonight, Joshua Birch, looking for a good, well-deserved sleep as well. Big thank you for Matthew for joining us for the IMSA portion of today's program. We'll switch over now to the first race of World Rally Championship.
Yep, and with World Rally Championship, the 2026 World Rally Championship season kicked off in a snowy and wet Monte Carlo, the condition often troublesome, was a big challenge for everyone, and a surprise winner shocked many in the WRC paddock once again. After taking Rally Estonia last year, Oliver Solberg, the 24-year-old, became the youngest winner at Rally Monte Carlo, finishing 50 seconds ahead of Elfyn Evans and Sebastian Ogier for a Toyota sweep of the podium. This is Solberg's second career start with Toyota Gazoo Racing WRT, and he is now 2 for 2, still perfect. So Joe, the next round is Rally Sweden, which is his home country. Do you think he can go 3 for 3?
I think he can go 3 for 3. It is just something where he has this momentum of you won Rally Monte Carlo, the biggest race of World Rally Championship. I get my W Series confused. You go out there, you get a win, and you do this in such a fashion where everyone thought it was going to be Sebastian Ogier, the king of the mountain. You just dethroned the king of the mountain, not barely, by over 50 seconds, by over a minute because he was in third place. What a start for this young kid to go 2 for 2 with Toyota Gazoo Racing. I think it really shows if he has the equipment, he can go out there, be competitive. I think he's really been maturing a lot. I think when it comes to his home country, in the snow again, Rally Sweden is always snow over up there in Umeå. He is going to be a favorite to win. I anticipate you're going to see a lot of people start picking him for pick a winner in Rally Sweden. The one thing I'll be a little concerned about, the pressure. You're in front of your home country, people that you grew up with, people that your family, friends that have followed you since you were a young kid. The name Solberg, famous in Rally Championship. If you get that to you, that's where you can make a mistake that's just unnatural. So I think he has to be a favorite. The big thing is for this young kid at 24 years old to go out there, get it done. That'll be a statement, Kobe, of saying, hey, I've arrived here at World Rally Championship and ready for the championship battle.
Yeah, for sure. You know, Solberg, he's definitely making the most of his opportunities with Toyota, considering he was initially with Hyundai in 2021. He is with Hyundai for R5 competition in Rally 2 in 2022. The WRC Hyundai team, he had 3 DNFs, 4 top 10 finishes, and a best finish of 4th. In 2023 and 2024, he went to the Skoda Rally 2. And in 2025, last year, he ended up getting that one-off victory with Toyota, and now he's full-time and the points leader in this year's World Rally Championship season after one round. What does this say about Solberg, and do you think Hyundai missed out on him?
I think with Solberg, it shows that, and we've talked about this in other disciplines of motorsports, if you get rushed up too quickly to the major league, you might be struggling. We talked about this in NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, everywhere that we cover in the grid ranking, and in some cases, the grid endurance performance index. You don't want to rush up your top talent. I think Hyundai is regretting what they've done. They have put in time and effort in him in 2021 R5 competition, Rally 2. I thought, okay, he's going to have a pathway, maybe a full year in Rally 2, before going to World Rally Championship Rally 1. But then they made an announcement. He's going to be in the WRC team 2022. He's 24 now. He was quite younger then. I think they just put too much expectation on him. I think with Altanek coming back to Hyundai, they thought, okay, we're going to have a solid lineup. We don't need him. He took this as an effort to, okay, I'm going to go to Skoda, Rally 2, hone my skills, try to get a second opportunity. And he did that. Hyundai, well, Tonic retired at the end of last year. He's out of it. So now I think Hyundai is saying we missed out, and I think this sort of brings up the question when it comes to Hyundai. They got that championship with Thierry Neuville in 2024. Last year, it seemed like they were just so inconsistent, it was just a Toyota show. Here we are again. Toyota, they're looking strong. They swept the podium. Hyundai, some of the drivers, they were messing up here and there. Thierry Neuville, 4th place finish. Respectable. But I just feel like this team, they're starting to fall a step behind Toyota to the point where in 2024, we're talking about Thierry Neuville getting his first championship, getting it done through the consistency. And Toyota did not have a solid full-time driver because it seemed like every time OJ came in, he got the win. Now, this year, though, Toyota with Solberg, that is the team to beat. Can Hyundai step it up? And that's where I'm starting to raise doubt, Kobe, that this Hyundai team, I just don't feel they have the presence in that team right now to go toe-to-toe with Oliver Solberg right now.
Yeah, and Joe, I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question. You're about Hyundai and all of that. I said, so given the fact, that they obviously missed out on Oliver Solberg, who looks like he could potentially, be one of the next big things in World Rally Championship, and considering the fact they struggled, a lot compared to, Toyota, do you think that this is a sign? I know it's been rumored the last few years. Do you think that this could potentially be the last or second to last year we see this manufacturer in World Rally Championship, or do you think if they stick around, do they need to make some serious changes to their driver lineup or team leaders?
I think if they stick around, which I hope they do, they need to make some major changes in the team leadership. I know they brought the former Renault team principal. The name is escaping me right now.
Is his name Cyril, something like that?
Cyril, yes.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It starts with the A, I believe. Cyril. I think his name's Cyril, I believe. Is that his name?
Yeah. I remember the big thing is he got a tattoo because Daniel Ricciardo got that podium finish in the Renault. But Cyril Petit, I believe is the name.
What I'm looking at, it says Cyril Abadabol, something like that.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but that's him. He's the president of Hyundai Motorsport.
They brought him in, and I felt like, okay, was this really? Yes, he comes from Formula One. That's a great start. But he came from the Renault organization, which, let's be honest, it has sort of been steadily declining, then becomes Alpine, and has declined more to while there's rumors of a potential buyer of that team. I don't know if he's exactly the best person to run such an organization in a sport he's very unfamiliar with compared to Formula One. Yeah, that's the pinnacle of motorsports. This is the pinnacle of World Rally competition. And I just don't know if he is exactly the right person. The last few years, last year I feel like was a really down year. If this is another down year, it's just a Toyota show. This is where Hyundai has to say, we need to make changes because we want to be competitive again. Heck, before Terry Newville got his championship, we're talking about, can he finally get it done? Because he seems like he'll start off great, flounder mid-season, come up short. Last year, okay, he's just not living up to it. Now he's getting to the point where I'm seeing him as a 4th, 5th place driver. But then, as you mentioned, Kobe, the rumors that Hyundai may be leaving World Rally Championship. We've talked about the series having an identity crisis when you have part-time drivers winning most of your races with Sebastian Ogier last year, Kali Rovanpera, where they were in contention. In fact, Ogier got the championship. Your part-time driver who decided, okay, I'll run full-time. If they lose Hyundai, what are we going to have on the fact that we only have Toyota and Ford, which is clearly the 3rd place team? Because Ford was just not there at all. And they've really stepped backwards since Autonic left Ford. I just feel like if Hyundai...
Ford is still in WRC?
M Sport. Ford M Sport.
I'll be honest, I had no idea they were still there. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah,
I guess it's telling, right? You don't even know they're there.
And that's the thing. We're down to Hyundai M Sport Ford World Rally team. I just don't feel like the drivers of Jan Armstrong, Shane Bynard are just at that level where what are we doing for it? If you're going to only have Toyota and a Ford team that is just not competitive, this series could be hurting. I think they need to look at some changes. I know what they've done with the hybrid unit and reverted back. The Rally 1 car, supposedly, it's going to make it a little bit more affordable. Has that really been working out? I just don't know where this series will be going if Hyundai says we're out. and especially with the rumors that World Rally Championship is closing in on a potential American stop. Hey, that would be great. American fans of World Rally Championship, they will flock to whether it's Tennessee or any other place that hosts this rally round. But for the casual fan, that hey, I want to see something new. Okay, there's only two teams, and one of them is really good. The other one is mid-pack. And what do you mean Rally 2, Rally 3 is also in the competition? For those not familiar, Rally 2, Rally 3, think of like the Truck Series and O'Reilly Series all racing with the Cup Series. That's how it goes. The top 10, you saw plenty of Rally 2 drivers in there. Just Ford was just nowhere in sight this weekend. So I think this is a situation, World Rally Championship, they ought to be following with Hyundai. It's like, we really want you to stay here. What can we do to make it so you guys stay here? And we can encourage more competition. We lost Subaru, we lost Mitsubishi, we lost Citroen. What are we going to do in World Rally Championship? It's very key.
Yeah, very, very key indeed, and as you know, we're going to be looking at the performance of each manufacturer in WRC throughout the 2026 season. And I have to say, you know, going back to Oliver Solberg before we get to our last segment of the show, I have to say, it's been very impressive what he's able to do. I think it's a good point, Joe, to bring up when he was at Hyundai before that. You know, young guy who probably got rushed up too soon, and you know, kind of it went back down to Rally 2 to hone his skills, and then once he was I guess ready, he was able to get that opportunity, made the most of his opportunity because I remember last year, everyone was so stunned to see him go up there and win in a one-off with Toyota, and they announced that he's going full-time, and now it looks like he's going to be one of the main championship contenders this year if he keeps on winning, because it's to be able to take the win from someone like I said to take away the win from like a Sebastian Ogier, somebody like that who I picked for pick a winner. It seemed like most people pick for pick a winner. I said it was just really crazy to see someone like that go out there, and take the best, take some of the best out, like Sebastian Ogier. And I think Oliver Solberg he's going to be a fun story to watch throughout the 2026 season. And we'll see where he lands in the grid ranking this year. If he can continue his winning ways, in the next few rallies, he's probably going to be towards the top of the board this year, Joe.
Top of the boards, I just think it's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to see. And the way World Rally Championship has been lately, you have woman dominant driver, they'll be up towards the top of the grid ranking. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all shapes up. Let's go ahead and bring Matthew Bro back in as it's getting ready. Time to close out the show with our shiny moments.
Yeah, time for our Grit One shining moment from this racing weekend. We had a lot to choose from. We had 60 different entries, 4 classes from the Rolex 24, and then you obviously had World Rally Championship, Rallye Monte Carlo to kick off their 2026 season. So let us know here live or on replay what's your one shining moment from this racing weekend. Joe, I'll start off with you. What's your shining moment?
My shining moment? It's coming from World Rally Championship. It has to be for Oliver Solberg getting 2 for 2, King of the Mountain. What a way to quiet anybody that was thinking, okay, you got a lucky win. Good luck. You're not worth it. Nope. He silenced him really quickly. And I think that's a great thing to do in World Rally Championship by 50 seconds over second place, by over a minute ahead of the King of the Mountain, Sebastian Ogier, in treacherous conditions. What I love about Rallye Monte Carlo, that first stage when they're racing up the mountain, there's fireworks, flares, the fans on both sides, under the night sky. What a great atmosphere. That is something I want to experience one of these days. Then we had the snow, treacherous conditions. We've seen videos across social media of the fans. Rally fans are a unique breed. Car goes off into the ditch. They push it out so it could keep racing. We saw beautiful images of the rally cars racing through downtown Monte Carlo, some of the famous streets, F1 race in the Monaco Grand Prix, under the lights in wet, rainy conditions. Phenomenal event. I would love to see Rally Championship be on cable television or somehow broadcast. I know it's just so unique the way their events run, multiple days, long hours, plenty of downtime. But if there's some way fans can get more exposure to this, I think they'll see Rally Championship is such a different breed of motorsport, and they'll fall in love with it.
I think you're muted, Matthew.
Yeah, I got so excited I muted myself. But yeah, I was being obvious one, I would say. So I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. I'm going to shout out to Solberg. I don't think any of us at Grid Network expected him to do what he did. So that makes it even more bittersweet. But I'm just going to probably go the easy route here. And I think Felipe Nasr just doing what he does best. I think that's probably a one shining moment. And most of the cars in the field, besides the early wreck about like 12 minutes in, most of the cars in the Rolex 24 made it at least 2 hours. So I think that's a shining moment. And most of the LMP2 cars, yes, they made it to the end too. I know there's always concern to see how far they can make it. So shout out to them too. But yeah, Felipe Nasr winning 3 in a row. That will be my one shining moment from the weekend. And if the rally guys want some of the weather that I have up here in central New York, they can have it. I don't want to deal with it. But it was also cool, like Joe mentioned, the fans. I saw a lot of videos running to make sure they can help push the cars back out onto the circuit. I think that was just an incredible thing.
Yeah, for sure, Matthew. I can't think of anything else, so I'm gonna have to piggyback off of you and say, Porsche Penske Motorsport 3 Rolex 24s in a row for that number 17, extremely impressive. And I wonder if it's going to be this is going to be the start of another championship winning season for that organization. I know now they can focus all their resources in on the IMSA program rather than putting part of it in IMSA and then part overseas in the World Endurance Championship. And I think this is going to make them even stronger. And looking at the legacy of Felipe Nasr, he just continues to grow, right? A guy who got into Formula One, very talented. Unfortunately, didn't really get to stay long in Formula One, and then he found a second home in sports car racing. And when you look at Felipe Nasr, he's becoming one of the most accomplished sports car racers in the world, and he can continue to have a great career in this. I know at one point he flirted about going to IndyCar. Doesn't look like that's going to happen at this stage, but who really knows what could possibly happen these days, because the guy driving for the captain has an IndyCar program, and you don't know what the future is going to hold for some of the IndyCar drivers who are currently under contract. So I guess never say never, but I think Felipe is really happy to be a Porsche factory driver and get all these opportunities to compete at historic venues and go out to competing for these race wins and championships, year in and year out, with one of the greatest car owners, in history, and Roger Penske. Yeah, so really looking forward to seeing what Penske Porsche Motorsport and Felipe Nasr can do this year.
It's going to be very interesting to see how the year goes out for them. And of course, we'll be here all year long across social media. Follow us at Grid Network TV, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, where we stream here, along with Twitch and Facebook, and X. So a lot of ways you can follow us. Subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs, and consider investing in the Grid Network, like Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, Crystal, and Nico. Super chats like Jason from yesterday, we gladly appreciate. And we also want to give a pick a winner update. Nobody picked Oliver Solberg. Nobody picked the number 7, even though we talked about it. I picked the number 6. So we're 4 races in, and only 2 people are on the leaderboard. So next week, the Clash, another opportunity for everybody to gain a point.
And Formula E.
We also got Formula E as well, too. So somebody could walk away with no points and then be in the lead or tie with the lead next weekend. So it's going to be very interesting to see how everything shakes up with pick a winner. And of course, you'll see everyone share their picks Wednesday on Grid Tonight. Matt, Josh, Kobe will all be on the air. And then, of course, we'll have the wrap-up coverage from the NASCAR Clash. So be sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss anything from the Grid Network right here. For Kobe and Matt, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We hope you enjoyed the full race weekend of our pre-race show, next pre-race show at Daytona 500. See you then, and tune in to Grid Tonight on Wednesday.